As of 2012, 360 million people in India lived in poverty, and 1.77 million people were homeless. India struggles to successfully withstand urbanization and its overpopulation crisis due to the problems created in the country during British rule. India is known to have a severe overpopulation crisis, with 1.2 billion people living in the country, and is stretched to its limit due to overpopulation. For example, in Mumbai, the uber-rich leave anyone who is in the middle or lower class hanging. This man has been living here for 45 years and runs a tiny flower shop. He shares the one room with his wife and 6 children. He worries about his children growing up here. I quote, "I want my children to live up in a safe home where we will not be constantly worrying about when it falls on our heads. They deserve better than what we got. I will go tomorrow if they give me a better accommodation, anything to leave this place." Rural poverty in India can be attributed to foreign intervention. British rule forced Indians to fulfill large amounts of demands for raw materials, which left farmers impoverished and stuck in rural parts of the country. They essentially deindustrialized India. 18.78 million families in India are living in inadequate housing, which is defined as no secure water supply or electricity, minimum amounts of space, sanitation, and hygiene. 14.99 of the 18.78 million families are living in congested houses requiring new homes. Before British colonialism, India was seen as a great international trade center. However, as Britain grew more powerful in its own right and began to influence Indian economy, the agricultural nation of India began to suffer more and more as its citizens reverted to agricultural jobs to fulfill British need for raw materials. As a newly agricultural nation, India struggled to keep up with the industrialization of Britain. It soon fell behind as many of the artisans who benefited from India's trade had left their jobs to work in agriculture. Famine also took a hold of rural populations during British rule. As often as the British would protect against famines in places of importance to them, rather than protecting citizens, especially in rural areas who suffered the most. This issue of insufficient aid during famines has played a part in the current problems faced by those who live in rural areas. This problem, as well as the lack of jobs available in rural settings and the lure of better economic standing in urban areas, has led the movement of people from rural to urban areas. There are many reasons for the recent movement of people within India's borders from rural areas to urban areas. For example, many Indians find that there are a number of reasons to leave rural areas in search of something better, or push factors, while there are a number of reasons to move to urban areas, or pull factors. It is assumed that urban areas provide more job opportunities and better living conditions. However, this is not necessarily true. For example, in Mumbai, migrants find unsafe living conditions, slums, difficulties locating jobs, and environmental problems such as poor air quality. Besides affecting those who move from one place to another, migration and immigration also affect the places themselves. For example, migration out of the rural areas benefits those areas by freeing up space and resources for remaining citizens. However, migration hurts rural areas by upsetting the population structure because typically, young people leave and the elderly remain. On the other hand, migration to urban areas can spur the economy and increase cultural diversity. It can also, unfortunately, put pressure on education, healthcare, housing, and other governmental or social services to provide those services or resources for all who need them. Because of this movement of people moving to urban areas, the problem of overpopulation has risen. Overpopulation in these urban areas have caused different problems such as unemployment, shortage of resources such as land and water, and also housing problems. There are not enough jobs available for people living in these urban areas. College students that have just finished school are not getting jobs, and laborers' rates are slowly decreasing. It is anticipated by 2021 that there will be about 500 million people between the ages of 15 and 34 that are unemployed. With the great migration of people to live in urban areas and a low job availability, shows that this is a problem that can continue to occur in the future. To ask, how long has this housing problem occurred, or when did it really become a problem? According to this graph, as the population of people have increased, the housing shortage has increased. However, in the last 20 years, the housing problem seems to be exponential. One of the social problems or forces that are contributing to the housing problem is kinship and family structure in Indian culture. Most families do not only live with their nuclear family, but members of their extended family live together as well. Because more individuals are living at home, to make conditions more suitable, families would need to find bigger houses, which is something that is hard to do. One of the consequences of overpopulation includes shortage of water because of the increase of people using these resources. It has been predicted by the year 2020, at least 21 cities, including the capital, will run out of groundwater. Although overpopulation is contributing to the shortage, the decrease of rainfall due to the climate change is also a big contributor. Increase of population and advancement of India is creating another problem. This problem is the pollution caused by the cities, adding to the growing threat of climate change. Fighting climate change while also trying to redevelop as a nation is extremely difficult for India to accomplish. India is currently dealing with greenhouse gas emissions as well as air pollution, which affects the climate change immensely, which in turn damages the water supply, as said previously. With the population continuing to increase, it is becoming more and more difficult for India to keep up. This economic growth unfortunately caused their nation to lose a large amount of natural resources. India's forests, clean air, food, and etc. were all lost in the economic boom. In all states but Goa and Sikkim show a forest rate decline of 10%. With further development comes other responsibilities, and many states have begun a restoration process to keep forests. There are various laws and regulations in India that have been put into place to conserve natural resources in the environment. For example, India has the Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act of 1974, which was enacted to preserve and control the water. Another example of a law or act that is under the Constitution to control these environmental problems include the Environmental Protection Act of 1986, which goal is to protect and improve the environment. However, it seems that the solution to these environmental problems is not to only create more laws and regulations, but it is to enforce the laws that already exist. In order for the housing situation in India to improve, movements need to be made to help the infrastructure and the economic status as a country. There has been a recent movement to bring more job opportunities to help accompany the number of people living in these urban areas. One movement that has been recently discussed is to create more power technologies to raise productivity, along with creating more jobs for people living in these urban areas. According to statistics as of 2012, about 56% of Indians lack the basics such as acceptable living standards, sanitation, and proper housing. Policymakers need to make an agenda and laws to help create jobs and social structure to help these people. As mentioned earlier, one reason for the movement of people from rural to urban in India is the hope of economic improvement in the form of finding better jobs. However, this wish does not always come true. The unemployment rate in India is at its highest yet, just over 6% in 2018, which is startling compared to the unemployment rate in 2012, which was 2.2%. This rate is higher in urban areas than in rural areas, which is troubling when we remember that job opportunities are a pull factor for people moving into urban areas. Urban unemployment goes hand in hand with urban housing problems, as it is often more difficult for those without a steady source of income to afford adequate housing. Overall, about 25% of India's urban population live in slums. In Bombay, nearly 57% of inhabitants live in slums. Ultimately, the housing crisis in urban India, while a complex issue, stems at least partially from a long-lasting effects of British colonialism and the difficulties of India to provide enough jobs to keep with the influx of people moving from rural to urban areas. This issue, combined with climate issues, makes the housing crisis an overwhelming feat for the Indian government to fix and will more likely persist for decades to come.